You're listening to the Weekend Sport Podcast with Jason Pine from News Talk ZB.
Football Ferns, meantime, back in action for the first time since the recent World Cup. In the week ahead, they play Chile tomorrow morning from 11 a.m. New Zealand time, and again on Wednesday. Let's get you to Chile, bring in Football Ferns defender Katie Bowen. Katie, thanks for joining us. This is the first time the squad's been together since the Football World Cup here in New Zealand in July and August. With a couple of months of hindsight, how do you reflect back as a player and as a team on the World Cup experience?
I think I would say that it's, for me, a bittersweet experience. I think that we did so well. Obviously, it was kind of, most have described, that night against Norway as the best night of our lives, and it certainly was. I think, though, that we did fall short of our goal of getting out of the group. So that really did sort of provide some heartbreak, unfortunately. So I was super proud of the team on obviously finishing with 4 points. I'm proud of them, but like I said, it's that bittersweet moment of falling just ever so short when I do believe we were more than capable of getting out of the group.
Has that nagged away at you in the time since the narrow inability to get out of the group, or have you managed to draw a line under it and move on?
No, honestly, I think that it's really nagged away at me and a lot of the girls. I think that post-tournament blues is certainly such a serious issue with athletes, especially seeing as we had a very long camp leading up to the World Cup as well. I would say that personally, along with others, have kind of really been struggling, but that's what makes it all the more special when we come into camp again to see familiar faces and get that taste of home.
I remember back to the game against Switzerland in Dunedin, the final of the 3 pool games for New Zealand. At the end of it, obviously, you hadn't made it into the knockout rounds and the camera panned around, and you were demonstrably emotional after that game against Switzerland in Dunedin. Were you surprised at how emotional you got when it all came to an end?
Somewhat. I mean, I'm a pretty, emotional person, not necessarily always outwardly. I don't tend to like to cry in front of people, but I think that, like I said, it was really heartbreak, and that's what I was experiencing in that moment. And I just think when you know that it's all over and something that you've been prepping for not only 4 years, but your whole life, it's really sort of disappointing. And in that initial moment, you don't kind of reflect on how much you've actually accomplished. It's more so what you've actually failed at. And unfortunately, that's sort of what sticks with you kind of in that time after, all being together. So I wasn't necessarily so surprised that I was like that. I'm also massively competitive. So to not get out of the group, I was also pissed off. But yeah, I think that, sport brings about so many emotions, and that clearly showed when the camera was on me.
Indeed. Has being back together then, Katie, fueled your desire to continue on, to build on what happened at the World Cup, to play well for New Zealand again and to aim for the Paris Olympics next year, for example?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's sort of two sides to the coin here. I think that emotions and feelings are still raw. So coming into camp kind of very close after that can be quite difficult because, like you said, you are trying to move on to Paris 2024, but you're also kind of got one eye in the rearview mirror a little bit, which you kind of need that time together to kind of discuss that and kind of get your emotions out and discuss that moving on process. So I think that, yes, it is massively beneficial us coming together, but yeah, emotions are still very heightened, but that's completely understandable.
Can I ask about your own performances at the World Cup? In the eyes of most observers, you were one of, if not the best, New Zealand player across the 3 games of the World Cup. How happy were you with the way you played personally?
I was extremely happy. I think that, I'm a team-orientated player, so I feel like despite personal performances, it doesn't mean a whole lot for me when, again, we fell short of not getting out of the group. Obviously, athletes have personal goals and they have team goals, and most of the time whenever you ask a team someone who's in a team sport, they kind of push aside all their personal goals and would much rather achieve the team goals. So I think that obviously, because of those performances, I was able to secure a contract with a really good club that I'm very fortunate to be at. So that side of it, I was very pleased with and proud of myself. But yeah, there's that underlying, dissatisfaction of not getting out of the group. So it's kind of mixed feelings.
I want to ask you about that move to Italy shortly, but in terms of where you're playing, just think back over your career for club and country, and you've played a lot of games in midfield, but in the last little while you've become a centre-back, not only for New Zealand, but also I think you played mainly there for Melbourne City over the last A-League Women's campaign. How did that move from midfield to the back come about? When did you all of a sudden become a defender and not a midfielder anymore?
I played actually centre back quite a bit in college, more so in a fullback, and I was kind of like a sweeper. So I didn't feel sort of uncomfortable there, but I wouldn't have said I am a centre back. And then we had a tour in Canada, which we couldn't have anyone travel from New Zealand, including staff members. So it was kind of a mismatch of team, coming from college players, people who had no caps, people who had 100 caps. And then I got tried out at centre back and did quite well there. And I actually really enjoyed it. And I didn't feel completely foreign to the position. I also had my dad who was a centre back. Both my brothers played centre back. And so I'd watched a lot of the game in that position. So I think that I got more and more comfortable, and I think there's certainly still stuff that I'm still learning and that I still want to become world class at. But I would say, I was really happy with my performances in the World Cup, having only been a centre back for a few years. But I think that now I'm consistently playing that, so hopefully I can, execute more and more those little tendencies of a centre back.
As mentioned, off the back of the World Cup, you secured a move to Italian club Inter Milan. You've played most of your career, Katie, in the US. Last summer, as I mentioned, with Melbourne City in the A-League Women's. Was playing in Europe something you were always keen to do?
Yeah, definitely. I think that it's always been sort of a daunting thought because I'm such like a homebody and family-orientated person. So moving to the other side of the world is not always ideal. But I think for me, at the point in my career, it's definitely a move that I wanted to take on and certainly a challenge that I wanted to face head on. And I think it was time, to be honest. And yeah, I think that going to such a big club, obviously it's foreign, so not English speaking, so that can be very overwhelming, but the team has completely welcomed me in. And I always had my eyes set on sort of like, I'm half English, so I've got a British passport. So I always thought maybe England, but when this opportunity came up, it was just, I couldn't say no.
Yeah, you've already played your first game, a 2-0 win, so a good start for you at your new club, Inter. How was it in terms of the standard and what you've been used to in the States here in the A-League Women's? Did you feel comfortable with the step up in standard?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that we have quite a few foreigners on the team. And so I think with foreigners, like everyone brings something different, a bit of individual flair that they've kind of grown up with in their countries. And I think that it's a very technical based team, which I kind of gathered going to Europe. And I think that the coach is incredibly passionate. She's Italian. And yeah, I think that the standard is very good. Trainings have gone very well. Unfortunately, my visa took quite some time to get through. So I've only actually been there a couple of weeks and then had that game, but managed to get 90 minutes under my belt, felt comfortable, and yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Great to hear. And just to the Football Ferns, a couple of games against Chile. First one tomorrow morning our time, and then Wednesday. They're number 41 in the world. They weren't at the World Cup, so we haven't really had much of a look at them. Do you know much about Chile heading into this 2-match series?
Yeah, I personally don't know too much about them. I know that they only just narrowly missed out on World Cup qualification. So I definitely know that they're not a team to take lightly. They've got an absolute world-class keeper. So we'll have to be, obviously on top of our game in the final third because she's not going to let, anything easy in. But yeah, I think that the aim of these two games is to kind of get over those post-World Cup blues, obviously reflect and analyse and, what could we have done better? What could we have done to get out of that group? But as we've discussed, you and I, it's also about moving on and looking forward to Paris 2024. So it's, new goals, not necessarily new game plan, but just sort of executing better, executing things that we have been doing consistently, but making sure that we're getting final product when doing that. So I think that's what it's about. It's also a short tour, which makes it very difficult. But yeah, I think we just want solid performances as a defender. I hope it's clean sheets, obviously. But yeah, hopefully we can get those results, but ultimately kind of like play our game and have more execution, I would say.
Look forward to seeing how it plays out. A couple of games against Chile to come. Great to get the chance to chat to you, Katie. All the best for these games. And then when you get back to Europe with your Italian club, it's been great to chat. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Katie. Katie Bowen out of the Football Ferns. 11 o'clock tomorrow morning, New Zealand time. They take on Chile. It's 7 o'clock local time in Santiago. And then on Wednesday, they'll play them again. I think the Wednesday game is behind closed doors for some reason. No broadcast available of that one. But tomorrow's game is an open game. I'm not sure what the situation is there, but a couple of games for the Football Ferns as they now turn their attention to the next big tournament, Paris 2024.
For more from Weekend Sport with Jason Pine, listen live to News Talk ZB weekends from midday or follow the podcast on iHeartRadio.